Hi, welcome to our very first video lecture. I'm John.
And I'm Dave.
Okay, are you ready to get down to work?
Yes, I am, John. It's time to get down to business. Let's start by talking about the central question of the course. One of the most important things we do in our everyday lives is to reason. We reason about new information we're given, perhaps to decide how it should affect our plans or our future behavior. When we learn a new piece of information, say from a teacher in a class or by reading a book or even just by looking outside and seeing that it's raining, we need to process this new information in the light of what we already know. And by doing so, we come up with yet more information over and above what we explicitly learned. For instance, if I see that it's raining, given what I already know, I might realize that the sidewalk outside will be wet. That's not something I can directly see perhaps, but it's something I conclude from the information I already have.
Right. And this phenomenon of processing information to yield new pieces of information is what we typically call reasoning. And we can do it well, or we can do it poorly. We can get things right, or we can make mistakes. Now, as you can imagine, it's very important to do it well, or as well as we can possibly do it. Now, we reason all the time. Sometimes we do it automatically without even noticing it. Dave's example of concluding that the sidewalks are wet is an example of that. You do that all the time and probably never think about it as a process of reasoning, but it is.
Right. We apply reasoning all the time. But there are some cases when we're particularly aware of it, perhaps acutely so. For example, if you've taken a math course, you may be familiar with the idea that we demonstrate the truth of some information from others. In the sciences, such as astronomy, physics, biology, we again explicitly construct pieces of reasoning that help us understand the universe.
Right. And another example is the legal system. In the legal system, when people are arguing that some person should or should not be convicted of a crime, there's an explicit case of reasoning. But there are other less explicit cases as well. So for example, whenever you read an op-ed in the newspaper or on a blog, the author of the piece is inviting you to follow them in a piece of reasoning that will lead you to a particular conclusion. You even reason when you're trying to decide which of a number of movies you could possibly see that you want to go to. You take into account the reviews, how far away the movie is, and maybe how good the popcorn is at the theater.
So people are generally pretty good at reasoning. We couldn't get through the day if we weren't. But we do sometimes make mistakes. This suggests that there is a standard against which our reasoning should be judged. Some pieces of information really do follow from others, and we'd like to be able to understand when this is true and when it's not. We would like to be able to distinguish correct, or as we will say, valid reasoning from incorrect or invalid reasoning.
So when one piece of information follows from another, we say that it's a logical consequence of the given information. And the goal of this course is to try to understand the nature of the consequence relation between pieces of information.
Now, we frequently obtain information in the form of pieces of language, either written or spoken. So one of the tasks that we'll be interested in is understanding the information that is conveyed by sentences. We'll talk a lot about sentences in this class, but as a general rule, we aren't really interested in the sentences themselves, but rather in the information that they convey. Think of the sentence, "Ewan gave the ball to Claire." This is one of many ways that we can convey the same information. We could instead say, Claire was given the ball by Ewan, or the ball was given by Ewan to Claire, and so on. Each of these sentences convey the same information in different ways. They have different emphasis, which is useful for other purposes, but the fact that they express is the same.
Right. And indeed, the same fact is expressible in every natural language. For example, French has ways of expressing this information, as does German, Tagalog, and so on. We call the factual information that the sentence conveys a proposition.
Intuitively, one proposition, the conclusion, follows from another, the premise, just when it's necessary that the conclusion is true whenever the premise is. Or, to put it another way, that in every possible situation in which the premise is true, the conclusion is true too. In order to make that intuition precise, though, we're going to have to get clear on some issues, among them what it means for a proposition to be true in the first place, and what it means for a situation to be possible, and so on. And these are among the questions that we'll try to answer in this class.
So let's think about two example sentences. Take the sentences, Stanford University is in California, and the sentence, London is the capital of the United Kingdom. Now, it happens that both of these sentences are true, but it's perfectly conceivable that either or both of them could have been false. It's possible, at least, that Stanford University could have been located in New Haven, Connecticut, or that Edinburgh could have been designated the capital of the UK. We can in fact imagine worlds in which both sentences are false, both are true, or one is true while the other is false. Now, all of these possibilities are perfectly consistent, and this demonstrates that neither of these sentences is a consequence of the other.
Now let's think about two different sentences. Socrates is a tall man, and Socrates is a man. In any situation in which the first of these sentences is true, the second will also be true. It's impossible for Socrates to be a tall man without being a man. And this tells us that Socrates is a man is a consequence of Socrates being a tall man.
Okay, and having introduced Socrates, it's now time to introduce the classic example of valid inference that all logic instructors since antiquity have used in their class. We may as well get it out of the way right now. So here's the example. All men are mortal, Socrates is a man, so Socrates is mortal. Now we indicate this as the series of three sentences, and I've drawn a line next to it with a little bar to separate the the premises from the conclusion. Now this is an example of a valid piece of reasoning. If the two premises are both true, then the conclusion has to be true as well. But an important thing to notice is that it's possible for the premises not to be true. We could imagine a situation in which not all men are mortal, and in which Socrates is a man, but it would be unclear whether the conclusion would be true in that case. Socrates might be one of the mortal men, or he might be one of the immortal men. If the first premise is false, then we're no longer guaranteed that the conclusion is true. Or suppose that the first premise is true, but Socrates is not human, so the second premise is not true. Maybe he's some other species. Now in that situation, the premises are not both true, and the fact that this is a valid argument tells us nothing about the truth of the conclusion. He may be mortal or he may not be, we just don't know.
So the crucial point is that if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true, but no prediction is made if the premises happen to be false, or some of the premises happen to be false.